I invite you, dear viewer, to picture the most elite warriors of the Imperium. No, not those ones. The ones who specialize in hunting down the greatest enemies of mankind. No, not those ones either. The ones who specifically hunt down demons and monsters from space hell. Yeah, those guys. The Grey Knights are the adorably edgy 666th Space Marine chapter, specializing in tracking down the most terrifying threats that Chaos can conjure and sending them right back into the warp. They've traditionally been a pretty slippery army, deep striking, redeploying, and appearing where they're needed most, and they've got shiny new rules for 10th edition. I'm Codex Demon Hunters Rememberer Campbell McLaughlin, and today we're reviewing Codex Grey Knights. We would like to thank Games Workshop for providing us with a review copy of the Codex. Once you've recited the necessary 666 catechisms of subscription, I compel you to hit that big ol' subscribe button. To read more about the Knights of Titan, head over to Goonhammer.com. Link in the description. Grey Knights are a highly mobile army of elite generalists. All of their units are pretty good at both range and melee, meaning that if you can outmaneuver your opponent and force them to take you on in your own terms, you will tear them apart. Where the Grey Knights can struggle is against solid, concerted opposition, forcing them to adapt and redeploy or unleash heavy hitters like Dread Knights to try and power run through. Before we teleport right into the heart of this review though, here's the 5 things you've got to know about this codex. Teleport Strike. Grey Knights retain their powerful army rule, and a full codex brings along new synergies to go with it. Paladins. The elite of the Grey Knights are properly terrifying, armed to the teeth with special options and hitting ultra hard in melee. Dread Knights. Still great, especially Grandmasters, who got new weapons and better rules. Also, there's a whole detachment here that just wants you to run 6, naturally. Purifiers. They're better than ever, with a clear use case and a solid role in the army. Redundancy. This book is sadly a little slim, with loads of units, detachments, and equipment options, all more or less doing the same thing as something else. Army rules. Grey Knights are famous for their teleport strikes, and that's represented here with their army rule, Gate of Infinity. If your army faction is Grey Knights, then at the end of your opponent's fight phase, you can remove a number of units with this ability from the battlefield and place them into strategic reserves. The number of units you can select depends on the game size. That's 2 units in Incursion, 3 in Strike Force, and 4 in Onslaught. This rule appears on everything except for treaded vehicles and flyers, and as anyone who has played 40k this edition knows, it's a pretty great ability. Every unit with this rule also happens to have Deep Strike, so you can pick up units and Deep Strike them somewhere else every turn. This keeps your army mobile, lets you easily achieve tactical objectives, and forces your opponent to screen all game long. This comes at the expense of Grey Knights not hitting quite as hard as you might like, but it's a genuinely great ability that's actually slightly improved over the index version. You used to have to bring your dudes down in the turn immediately afterwards, but now you can hold on to them, rapid ingress them, or otherwise keep your opponent guessing. Every model in the unit has to have this ability though, so Inquisitors can't really tag along. But even the old school walking dishwasher Dreadnought has this rule, which I think both you and I can agree is pretty funny. Detachments. Grey Knights armies have access to 6 detachments, 5 in this book, and the rather good Warpbane task force from Grotmus. We'll get into these in separate detachment-focused videos and detachment-focused articles on Goonhammer.com, but here's the extremely short versions. Brotherhood Strike is an all-rounder detachment that leans into the army rule, powering up your units as they arrive from Deep Strike and providing additional ways to leap into reserves. Hallowed Conclave is your Terminator-centric detachment, giving you abilities to make your most elite units more flexible. Banishers is a high-pressure detachment designed to keep your opponent on the ropes and annihilate them in melee. Sanctic Spearhead is a vehicle-heavy detachment that mostly focuses on Dread Knights. Augorium Task Force is a finesse detachment that increases the flexibility of the army rule, and it adds a few additional tricks to thwart your opponent's plans. And going back to Grotmus is the Warpbane Task Force, a hard-hitting detachment that amplifies the power of your units, especially Purifiers and those around them. Datasheets. A new codex typically means new units, but that's sadly not the case here. The Dread Knight got an upgrade sprue with a few new weapon options, but that's it. Instead, we'll start by saying goodbye to a pair of old friends. Caldor Drago and Brother Captain Stern were both sadly lost in the same warp rift that seems to eat up every model that isn't in plastic, and they're no longer in the codex as a result. Drago seems like too big of a deal to leave out of the game forever, so I expect he'll be back with a cool plastic model at some point in the future. But for right now, he's lost in the warp. Well, that's definitely sad news. The rest of the datasheets are more of a mixed bag. I don't want to spend all day on them because they aren't individually that exciting, and most of them stayed basically the same as the index, but here's the changes we found. We'll start with the biggest and most obvious. The Grandmaster or Nemesis Dread Knight got a new sprue with some more weapon options. These large adult sun baby carriers are still going to be a mainstay of a load of Grey Knights lists and are pretty much the only reliable way to take out monsters and vehicles. They get to reroll hits, wounds, and damage against monsters and vehicles in melee all the time, not just once per phase anymore, and they share a command point reduction ability with your standard Grandmasters. That rule, Warrior Strategist, can only be used once per battle round, so you can't just spam free stratagems everywhere, but it still wouldn't be surprising if people doubled or tripled up on these big boys. The new weapon options are generally pretty cool, but as these are likely going to be your tank hunters, you'll probably be gearing for the hammer and the new sublimator option. That cooker is twin-linked in Melta 4, making it a pretty beefy piece of anti-armor kit. Even if you don't gear up that way though, your rerolls mean these guys can punch up into monsters and vehicles without much issue. They also have a Fragstorm grenade launcher unceremoniously strapped to their chests now, in case you want another Strength 4 weapon that you'll forget to fire. Grandmasters are basically just Space Marine captains now. They lost their ability to ignore modifiers for their unit, and now can just crank up their strength and attacks by 3 once per game. That's not enough to push them past the strength threshold needed to fight anything toughness 10 or higher, and it isn't generally as useful as their old rule. Brotherhood Terminators got a nerf. I don't know why they decided to take away lethal hits on one of the few units that could maybe plink some damage off of tougher targets, but they lost their lethal hits in the charge in exchange for +1 AP in melee against non-monster and non-vehicle units. You know, AP, the thing that matters most when fighting demons. Paladins can take apothecaries now, letting them return a dead non-character model to the unit. As these models are both tough and expensive, that's a great added value to the unit. Even better, they now gain an extra point of damage on the charge, letting you sweep away 3 wound models with ease. Purifiers gained a point of AP on their Sacred Flame attacks, which is always handy, and lost their old Sanctity of Purpose rule. Instead, they now reroll once to wound or all wound rolls against a unit on an objective, both in shooting and in melee. These are suddenly a great unit with an obvious use case for clearing fools off of objectives, made even better if you stick Castellan Crow in there for an extra shot with those purifying flame attacks. Otherwise, the changes across the list are pretty minor or don't really change how you're going to use a unit. Rhinos hand out a feel no pain against mortal wounds, but you were already using them as a taxi cab anyway, so that doesn't change their job. Land Raiders still raid land, Interceptor squads still shoot and scoot around the table, and you'll continue to forget that the Storm Talon gunship is even in this book. I swear, I haven't thought about that thing since I still had hair. This book doesn't change a massive amount about how Grey Knights play, so if you liked forcing your opponent to play whack-a-mole with your Knights of Titan, you'll probably be just fine. Apply pressure with Dread Knights and Terminators, score with sheet power and stuff, and keep a few hammer blows in reserve to smash through anything that needs special attention. Most of the muscle in this book is tied up in Dread Knights, Paladins, and Purifiers, and those are going to be the core of most lists. Warpbane Task Force's reliability may well keep it as the standout detachment, and it's flexible enough that you can build around any of those units in it, but there should also be Dread Knight heavy lists out of Sanctic Spearhead, and maybe some more all-rounder experimentation with Banishers and Brotherhood Strike. As a faction, they'll largely struggle into harder targets. With a blanket strength 6 across their Nemesis Force weapons, it'll be tough to deal with heavy vehicles or big monsters in melee. A Power Fist or Thunderhammer option in their infantry squads would have gone a long way to help here, as even their ranged weapons lack the punch you want to take on anything like a knight, or, God forbid, a Great Unclean One, where Toughness 12 will basically stop this army in its tracks. It's kind of a bummer, but we weren't super hot on this one. There isn't a whole lot new to the Codex, and what is new is pretty cautious or redundant. That's not to say the Codex is bad or anything, but if you're looking for a meaningful shakeup of how Grey Knights play, you're probably not going to find it this time. If you'd like to learn more about Grey Knights, how to paint them, and how to play them, head over to Goonhammer.com. You can also support us on Patreon for bonus podcasts, Discord access, and other cool stuff. Or just subscribe to us here on YouTube. I've been your crummy Codex Castellan Campbell McLaughlin, and I need to go purify my glasses. These lenses are filthy. Thanks for watching.